The Dehra Express usually drew into Shamli at about 5 o'clock in the morning, at which time the station would be dimly lit and the jungle across the tracks would just be visible in the faint light of dawn. Shamli is a small station at the foot of the Shivalik hills, and the Shivaliks lie at the foot of the Himalayas, which in turn lie at the feet of God. The station, I remember, had only one platform, an office for the station master, and a waiting room. The platform boasted a tea stall, a fruit vendor, and a few stray dogs. Not much else was required, because the train stopped at Shamli for only 5 minutes before rushing on into the forests. Why it stopped at Shamli, I never could tell. Nobody got off the train and nobody got in. There were never any coolies on the platform. But the train would stand there a full 5 minutes, and the guard would blow his whistle, and presently Shamli would be left behind and forgotten, until I passed that way again. I was paying my relations in Saharanpur an annual visit, when the night train stopped at Shamli. I was 36 at the time, and still single. On this particular journey, the train came into Shamli just as I awoke from a restless sleep. The third-class compartment was crowded beyond capacity, and I had been sleeping in an upright position, with my back to the lavatory door. Now someone was trying to get into the lavatory. He was obviously hard-pressed for time. "I'm sorry, brother," I said, moving as much as I could do to one side. He stumbled into the closet without bothering to close the door. "Where are we now?" I asked the man sitting beside me. He was smoking a strong, aromatic bidi. "Shamli Station," he said, rubbing the palm of a large calloused hand over the frosted glass of the window. I let the window down and stuck my head out. There was a cool breeze blowing down the platform, a breeze that whispered of autumn in the hills. As usual, there was no activity, except for the fruit vendor walking up and down the length of the train with his basket of mangoes balanced on his head. At the tea stall, a kettle was steaming, but there was no one to mind it. I rested my forehead on the window ledge and let the breeze play on my temples. I had been feeling sick and giddy, but there was a wild sweetness in the wine that I found soothing. Yes, I said to myself, I wonder what happens in Shamli, behind the station walls. My fellow passenger offered me a bidi. He was a farmer, I think, on his way to Dehra. He had a long, untidy, sad moustache. We had been more than 5 minutes at the station. I looked up and down the platform, but nobody was getting on or off the train. Presently the guard came walking past our compartment. "What's the delay?" I asked him. "Some obstruction further down the line," he said. "Will we be here long?" "I don't know what the trouble is." "About half an hour, at the least." My neighbor shrugged, and, throwing the remains of his bidi out of the window, closed his eyes and immediately fell asleep. I moved restlessly in my seat, and then the man came out of the lavatory, not so urgently now, and with obvious peace of mind. I closed the door for him. I stood up and stretched, and this stretching of my limbs seemed to set in motion a stretching of the mind, and I found myself thinking, I am in no hurry to get to Saharanpur, and I have always wanted to see Shamli, behind the station walls. If I get down now, I can spend the day here. It will be better than sitting in this train for another hour. Then in the evening I can catch the next train home. In those days I never had the patience to wait for second thoughts, and so I began pulling my small suitcase out from under the seat. The farmer woke up and asked, "What are you doing, brother?" "I'm getting out," I said. He went to sleep again. It would have taken at least 15 minutes to reach the door, as people and their belongings cluttered up the passage, so I let my suitcase down from the window and followed it onto the platform. There was no one to collect my ticket at the barrier, because there was obviously no point in keeping a man there to collect tickets from passengers who never came, and anyway, I had a through ticket to my destination, which I would need in the evening. I went out of the station and came to Shamli. Outside the station there was a neem tree, and under it stood a tonga. The tonga pony was nibbling at the grass at the foot of the tree. The youth in the front seat was the only human in sight. There were no signs of inhabitants or habitation. I approached the tonga, and the youth stared at me as though he couldn't believe his eyes. "Where is Shamli?" I asked. "Why, friend, this is Shamli," he said. I looked around again, but couldn't see any signs of life. A dusty road led past the station and disappeared in the forest. "Does anyone live here?" I asked. "I live here," he said, with an engaging smile. He looked an amiable, happy-go-lucky fellow. He wore a cotton tunic and dirty white pajamas. "Where?" I asked. "In my tonga, of course," he said. "I have had this pony 5 years now. I carry supplies to the hotel. But today the manager has not come to collect them." "You are going to the hotel?" "I will take you." "Oh, so there is a hotel?" "Well, friend, it is called that. And there are a few houses too, and some shops, but they are all about a mile from the station. If they were not a mile from here, I would be out of business." I felt relieved, but I still had the feeling of having walked into a town consisting of one station, one pony, and one man. "You can take me," I said. "I'm staying till this evening." He heaved my suitcase into the seat beside him, and I climbed in at the back. He flicked the reins and slapped his pony on the buttocks, and, with a roll and a lurch, the buggy moved off down the dusty forest road. "What brings you here?" asked the youth. "Nothing," I said. "The train was delayed, I was feeling bored, and so I got off." He did not believe that, but he didn't question me further. The sun was reaching up over the forest, but the road lay in the shadow of tall trees, eucalyptus, mango, and neem. "Not many people stay in the hotel," he said. "So it is cheap. You will get a room for 5 rupees. "Who is the manager?" "Mr. Satish Dayal. It is his father's property." Satish Dayal could not pass his exams or get a job, so his father sent him here to look after the hotel. The jungle thinned out, and we passed a temple, a mosque, a few small shops. There was a strong smell of burnt sugar in the air, and in the distance I saw a factory chimney. That, then, was the reason for Shamli's existence. We passed a bullock cart laden with sugarcane. The road went through fields of cane and maj, and then, just as we were about to re-enter the jungle, the youth pulled his horse to a side road and the hotel came in sight. It was a small white bungalow, with a garden in the front, banana trees at the sides, and an orchard of guava trees at the back. We came jingling up to the front veranda. Nobody appeared, nor was there any sign of life on the premises. "They are all asleep," said the youth. I said, "I'll sit in the veranda and wait." I got down from the tonga, and the youth dropped my case on the veranda steps. Then he stood in front of me, smiling amiably, waiting to be paid. "Well, how much?" I asked. "As a friend, only 1 rupee." "That's too much," I complained. "This is not Delhi. This is Shamli," he said. "I am the only tonga in Shamli. You may not pay me anything, if that is your wish. But then, I will not take you back to the station this evening. You will have to walk." I gave him the rupee. He had both charm and cunning, an effective combination. "Come in the evening at about 6, I said. "I will come," he said, with an infectious smile. "Don't worry." I waited till the tonga had gone round the bend in the road before walking up the veranda steps. The doors of the house were closed, and there were no bells to ring. I didn't have a watch, but I judged the time to be a little past 6 o'clock. The hotel didn't look very impressive. The whitewash was coming off the walls, and the cane chairs on the veranda were old and crooked. A stag's head was mounted over the front door, but one of its glass eyes had fallen out. I had often heard hunters speak of how beautiful an animal looked before it died, but how could anyone with a true love of the beautiful care for the stuffed head of an animal, grotesquely mounted, with no resemblance to its living aspect? I felt too restless to take any of the chairs. I began pacing up and down the veranda, wondering if I should start banging on the doors. Perhaps the hotel was deserted. Perhaps the tonga driver had played a trick on me. I began to regret my impulsiveness in leaving the train. When I saw the manager, I would have to invent a reason for coming to his hotel. I was good at inventing reasons. I would tell him that a friend of mine had stayed here some years ago, and that I was trying to trace him. I decided that my friend would have to be a little eccentric, having chosen Shamli to live in, that he had become a recluse, shutting himself off from the world. His parents, no, his sister, for his parents would be dead, had asked me to find him if I could, and, as he had last been heard of in Shamli, I had taken the opportunity to inquire after him. His name would be Major Roberts, retired. I heard a tap running at the side of the building, and walking around, found a young man bathing at the tap. He was strong and well-built, and slapped himself on the body with great enthusiasm. He had not seen me approaching, and I waited until he had finished bathing and had began to dry himself. "Hello," I said. He turned at the sound of my voice, and looked at me for a few moments with a puzzled expression. He had a round, cheerful face and crisp black hair. He smiled slowly, but it was a more genuine smile than the tonga driver's. So far I had met two people in Shamli, and they were both smilers. That should have cheered me, but it didn't. "You have come to stay?" he asked, in a slow, easy-going voice. "Just for the day," I said. "You work here?" "Yes, my name is Dayaram. The manager is asleep just now, but I will find a room for you." He pulled on his vest and pajamas, and accompanied me back to the veranda. "Here." He picked up my suitcase and, unlocking a side door, led me into the house. We went down a passageway, Then Dayaram stopped at the door on the right, pushed it open, and took me into a small, sunny room that had a window looking out on the orchard. There was a bed, a desk, a couple of cane chairs, and a frayed and faded red carpet. "Is it all right?" said Dayaram. "Perfectly all right. They have breakfast at 8 o'clock. But if you are hungry, I will make something for you now." "No, it's all right." "Are you the cook too?" "I do everything here." "Do you like it?" "No," he said, and then added, in a sudden burst of confidence, "there are no women for a man like me." "Why don't you leave, then?" "I will," he said, with a doubtful look on his face. "I will leave." After he had gone, I shut the door and went into the bathroom to bathe. The cold water refreshed me and made me feel one with the world. After I had dried myself, I sat on the bed, in front of the open window. A cool breeze, smelling of rain, came through the window and played over my body. I thought I saw a movement among the trees. And getting closer to the window, I saw a girl on a swing. She was a small girl, all by herself, and she was swinging to and fro, and singing, and her song carried faintly on the breeze. I dressed quickly, and left my room. The girl's dress was billowing in the breeze, her pigtails flying about. When she saw me approaching, she stopped swinging, and stared at me. I stopped a little distance away. "Who are you?" she asked. "A ghost," I replied. "You look like one," she said. I decided to take this as a compliment, as I was determined to make friends. I did not smile at her, because some children dislike adults who smile at them all the time. "What's your name?" I asked. "Kiran," she said. "I'm 10. You're getting old." "Well, we all have to grow old one day. Aren't you coming any closer?" "May I?" I asked. "You may. You can push the swing." One pigtail lay across the girl's chest, the other behind her shoulder. She had a serious face, and obviously felt she had responsibilities. She seemed to be in a hurry to grow up, and I suppose she had no time for anyone who treated her as a child. I pushed the swing until it went higher and higher, and then I stopped pushing, so that she came lower each time and we could talk. "Tell me about the people who live here," I said. "There is Hira," she said. "He's the gardener. He's nearly 100. You can see him behind the hedges in the garden. You can't see him unless you look hard. He tells me stories, a new story every day. He's much better than the people in the hotel, and so is Dayaram." Yes, I met Dayaram. He's my bodyguard. He brings me nice things from the kitchen when no one is looking. "You don't stay here?" "No, I live in another house. You can't see it from here. My father is the manager of the factory." "Aren't there any other children to play with?" I asked. "I don't know any," she said. "And the people staying here?" "Oh, they." Apparently Kiran didn't think much of the hotel guests. "Miss Deeds is funny when she's drunk. And Mr. Lin is the strangest." "And what about the manager, Mr. Dayal?" "He's mean. And he gets frightened of slightest things. But Mrs. Dayal is nice, she lets me take flowers home. But she doesn't talk much." I was fascinated by Kiran's ruthless summing up of the guests. I brought the swing to a standstill and asked, "And what do you think of me?" "I don't know as yet," said Kiran quite seriously. "I will think about you." As I came back to the hotel, I heard the sound of a piano in one of the front rooms. I didn't know enough about music to be able to recognize the piece, but it had sweetness and melody, though it was played with some hesitancy. As I came nearer, the sweetness deserted the music, probably because the piano was out of tune. The person at the piano had distinctive Mongolian features, and so I presumed he was Mr. Lin. He hadn't seen me enter the room, and I stood beside the curtains of the door, watching him play. He had full round lips and high slanting cheekbones. His eyes were large and round and full of melancholy. His long, slender fingers hardly touched the keys. I came nearer, and then he looked up at me, without any show of surprise or displeasure, and kept on playing. "What are you playing?" I asked. "Chopin," he said. "Oh, yes. It's nice, but the piano is fighting it." "I know. This piano belonged to one of Kipling's aunts. It hasn't been tuned since the last century." "Do you live here?" "No, I come from Calcutta," he answered readily. "I have some business here with the sugarcane people, actually, though I am not a businessman." He was playing softly all the time, so that our conversation was not lost in the music. "I don't know anything about business, but I have to do something." "Where did you learn to play the piano?" "In Singapore. A French lady taught me. She had great hopes of my becoming a concert pianist when I grow up. I would have toured Europe and America." "Why didn't you?" "We left during the war, and I had to give up my lessons." "And why did you go to Calcutta?" "My father is a Calcutta businessman." "What do you do, and why do you come here?" he asked. If I am not being too inquisitive. Before I could answer, a bell rang, loud and continuously, drowning the music and conversation. "Breakfast," said Mr. Lin. A thin dark man, wearing glasses, stepped nervously into the room and peered at me in an anxious manner. "You arrived last night?" "That's right," I said. "I just want to stay the day." "I think you're the manager?" "Yes." "Would you like to sign the register?" I went with him past the bar and into the office. I wrote my name and Missouri address in the register and the duration of my stay. I paused at the column marked profession, thought it would be best to fill it with something, and wrote author. "You are here on business?" asked Mr. Dayal. "No, not exactly. You see, I'm looking for a friend of mine who was heard of in Shamli about 3 years ago. I thought I'd make a few inquiries in case he's still here." "What was his name?" "Perhaps he stayed here." "Major Roberts," I said. "An Anglo-Indian." "Well, you can look through the old registers after breakfast." He accompanied me into the dining room. The establishment was really more of a boarding house than a hotel, because Mr. Dayal ate with his guests. There was a round mahogany dining table in the center of the room, and Mr. Lin was the only one seated at it. Dayaram hovered about with plates and trays. I took my seat next to Lin, and, as I did so, a door opened from the passage, and a woman of about 35 came in. She had on a skirt and blouse, which accentuated a firm, well-rounded figure, and she walked on high heels with a rhythmical swaying of the hips. She had an uninteresting face, camouflaged with lipstick, rouge and powder, the powder so thick that it had become embedded in the natural lines of her face, but her figure compelled admiration. "Miss Deeds," whispered Lynn. There was a false note to her greeting. "Hello, everyone," she said heartily, straining for effect. "Why are you all so quiet? Has Mr. Lin been playing the funeral march again?" She sat down and continued talking. "Really, we must have a dance or something to liven things up. You must know some good numbers, Lin, after your experience of Singapore nightclubs. What's for breakfast?" "Boiled eggs." "Dayaram, can't you make an omelette for a change?" "I know you're not a professional cook, but you don't have to give us the same thing every day. And there's absolutely no reason why you should burn the toast. You'll have to do something about a cook, Mr. Dayal." Then she noticed me sitting opposite her. "Oh, hello," she said, genuinely surprised. She gave me a long, appraising look. "This gentleman," said Mr. Dayal, introducing me, "is an author." "That's nice," said Miss Deeds. "Are you married?" "No," I said. "Are you?" "Funny, isn't it?" she said, without taking offense. "No one in this house seems to be married." "I'm married," said Mr. Dayal. "Oh, yes, of course," said Miss Deeds. "And what brings you to Shamli?" she asked, turning to me. "I'm looking for a friend called Major Roberts." Lynn gave an exclamation of surprise. I thought he had seen through my deception. But another game had begun. "I knew him," said Lynn. "A great friend of mine." "Yes," continued Lynn. "I knew him. A good chap, Major Roberts." Well, there I was, inventing people to suit my convenience, and people like Mr. Lynn started inventing relationships with them. I was too intrigued to try and discourage him. I wanted to see how far he would go. "When did you meet him?" asked Lynn, taking the initiative. "Oh, only about 3 years back. Just before he disappeared. He was last heard of in Shamli." "Yes, I heard he was here," said Lynn. "But he went away when he thought his relatives had traced him. He went into the mountains near Tibet." "Did he?" I said, unwilling to be instructed further. "What part of the country?" "I come from the hills myself. I know the Mana and Niti passes quite well. If you have any idea of exactly where he went, I think I could find him." I had the advantage in this exchange, because I was the one who had originally invented Roberts. Yet I couldn't bring myself to end his deception, probably because I felt sorry for him. A happy man wouldn't take the trouble of inventing friendships with people who didn't exist. He'd be too busy with friends who did. "You have had a lonely life, Mr. Lin?" I asked. "Lonely," said Mr. Lin, with forced incredulousness. "I'd never been lonely till I came here a month ago, when I was in Singapore." "You never get any letters though, do you?" asked Miss Deeds suddenly. Lin was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Do you?" Miss Deeds lifted her head a little, as a horse does when it is annoyed, and I thought her pride had been hurt, but then she laughed unobtrusively and tossed her head. "I never write letters," she said. "My friends gave me up as hopeless years ago. They No, it's no use writing to me, because they rarely get a reply. They call me the jungle princess. Mr. Dayal tittered, and I found it hard to suppress a smile. To cover up my smile, I asked, "You teach here?" "Yes, I teach at the girls' school," she said with a frown. "But don't talk to me about teaching. I have enough of it all day." "You don't like teaching?" She gave an aggressive look. "Should I?" she asked. "Shouldn't you?" I said. She paused, and then said, "Who are you, anyway, the inspector of schools?" "No," said Mr. Dayal, who wasn't following very well, "he's a journalist." "I have heard they are nosy," said Miss Deeds. Once again Lynn interrupted to steer the conversation away from a delicate issue. "Where's Mrs. Dayal this morning?" asked Lynn. "She spent the night with our neighbors," said Mr. Dayal. "She should be here after lunch." It was the first time Mrs. Dayal had been mentioned. Nobody spoke either well or ill of her. I suspected that she kept her distance from the others, avoiding familiarity. I began to wonder about Mrs. Dayal. Dayaram came in from the veranda, looking worried. "Hira's dog has disappeared," he said. "He thinks a leopard took it." Hira, the gardener, was standing respectfully outside on the veranda steps. We all hurried out to him, firing questions which he didn't try to answer. "Yes, it's a leopard," said Kiran, appearing from behind Hira. "It's going to come into the hotel," she added cheerfully. "Be quiet," said Satish Dayal crossly. "There are pug marks under the trees," said Dayaram. Mr. Dayal, who seemed to know little about leopards or pug marks, said, "I will take a look," and led the way to the orchard, the rest of us trailing behind in an ill-assorted procession. There were marks on the soft earth in the orchard. They could have been a leopard's, which went in the direction of the river bed. Mr. Dayal paled a little and went hurrying back to the hotel. Hira returned to the front garden, the least excited, the most sorrowful. Everyone else was thinking of a leopard, but he was thinking of the dog. I followed him and watched him weeding the sunflower beds. His face wrinkled like a walnut, but his eyes were clear and bright. His hands were thin and bony, but there was a deftness and power in the wrist and fingers, and the weeds flew fast from his spade. He had cracked, parchment-like skin. I could not help thinking of the gloss and glow of Dayaram's limbs, as I had seen them when he was bathing, and wondered if Hira's had once been like that, and if Dayaram's would ever be like this, and both possibilities, or were they probabilities, saddened me. Our skin, I thought, is like the leaf of a tree, young and green and shiny, then it gets darker and heavier, sometimes spotted with disease, sometimes eaten away, then fading, yellow and red, then falling, crumbling into dust or feeding the flames of fire. I looked at my own skin, still smooth, not coarsened by labor. I thought of Kiran's fresh rose-tinted complexion, Miss Deeds' skin, hard and dry, Lynn's pale taut skin, stretched tightly across his prominent cheeks and forehead, and Mr. Dayal's grey skin, growing thick hair. And I wondered about Mrs. Dayal and the kind of skin she would have. "Did you have the dog for long?" I asked Hira. He looked up with surprise, for he had been unaware of my presence. 6 years, Sahib," he said. "He was not a clever dog, but he was very friendly. He followed me home one day, when I was coming back from the bazaar. I kept telling him to go away, but he wouldn't. It was a long walk and so I began talking to him. I liked talking to him, and I have always talked with him, and we have understood each other. That first night, when I came home, I shut the gate between us. But he stood on the other side, looking at me with trusting eyes. Why did he have to look at me like that? So you kept him? Yes, I could never forget the way he looked at me. I shall feel lonely now, because he was my only companion. My wife and son died long ago. It seems I am to stay here forever, until everyone has gone, until there are only ghosts in Shamli. Already the ghosts are here. I heard a light footfall behind me and turned to find Kiran. The barefooted girl stood beside the gardener, and with her toes began to pull at the weeds. You are a lazy one, said the old man. If you want to help me, sit down and use your hands. I looked at the girl's fair round face, and in her bright eyes I saw something old and wise, and I looked into the old man's wise eyes, and saw something forever bright and young. The skin cannot change the eyes are the true reflection of a man's age and sensibilities. Even a blind man has hidden eyes. I hope we shall find the dog, said Kiran. But I would like a leopard. Nothing ever happens here. Not now, sighed Hira. Not now. Why, once there was a band and people danced till morning, but now I have always been here, said Hira. I was here before Shamli. Before the station? Before there was a station, or a factory, or a bazaar. It was a village then, and the only way to get here was by bullock cart. Then a bus service was started, then the railway lines were laid and a station built, then they started the sugar factory, and for a few years Shamli was a town. But the jungle was bigger than the town. The rains were heavy and malaria was everywhere. People didn't stay long in Shamli. Gradually, they went back into the hills. Sometimes I too wanted to go back to the hills, but what is the use when you are old and have no one left in the world except a few flowers in a troublesome garden? I had to choose between the flowers and the hills, and I chose the flowers. I am tired now, and old, but I am not tired of flowers. I could see that his real world was the garden. There was more variety in his flower beds than there was in the town of Shamli. Every month, every day, there were new flowers in the garden, but there were always the same people in Shamli. I left Kiran with the old man and returned to my room. It must have been about 11 o'clock. I was facing the window when I heard my door being opened. Turning, I perceived the barrel of a gun moving slowly round the edge of the door. Behind the gun was Satish Dayal, looking hot and sweaty. I didn't know what his intentions were, so, deciding it would be better to act first and reason later, I grabbed the pillow from the bed and flung it in his face. I then threw myself at his legs and brought him crashing down to the ground. When we got up, I was holding the gun. It was an old Enfield rifle, probably dating back to Afghan wars, the kind that goes off at the least encouragement. But why? Stammered the disheveled and alarmed Mr. Dayal. I don't know, I said menacingly. Why did you come in here pointing this at me? I wasn't pointing it at you. It's for the leopard. Oh, so you came into my room looking for a leopard? You have, I presume been stalking one about the hotel? By now I was convinced that Mr. Dayal had taken leave of his senses and was hunting imaginary leopards. No, no, cried the distraught man, becoming more confused. I was looking for you. I wanted to ask you if you could use a gun. I was thinking we should go looking for the leopard that took Hira's dog. Neither Mr. Lin nor I can shoot. Your gun is not up to date. I said. It's not at all suitable for hunting leopards. A stout stick would be more effective. Why don't we arm ourselves with lathis and make a general assault? I said this banteringly, but Mr. Dayal took the idea quite seriously. Yes, yes, he said. With alacrity, Dayaram has got 1 or 2 lathis in the godown. The 3 of us could make an expedition. I have asked Mr. Lin, but he says he doesn't want to have anything to do with leopards. What about our jungle princes? I said. Miss Deeds should be pretty good with a lathi. Yes, yes, said Mr. Dayal humorlessly, but we'd better not ask her. Collecting Dayaram and 2 lathis, we set off for the orchard and began following the pug marks through the trees. It took us 10 minutes to reach the river bed, a dry, hot, rocky place. Then we went into the jungle, Mr. Dayal keeping well to the rear. The atmosphere was heavy and humid, and there was not a breath of air amongst the trees. When a parrot squawked suddenly, shattering the silence, Mr. Dayal let out a startled exclamation and started for home. What was that? He asked nervously. A bird, I explained. I think we should go back now, he said. I don't think the leopard's here. You never know with leopards, I said. They could be anywhere. Mr. Dayal stopped away from the bushes. I will have to go, he said. I have a lot of work. You keep a lathi with you, and I will send Dayaram back later. That's very thoughtful of you, I said. Dayaram scratched his head and reluctantly followed his employer back through the trees. I moved on slowly, down the little-used path, wondering if I should also return. I saw 2 monkeys playing on the branch of a tree, and decided that there could be no danger in the immediate vicinity. Presently I came to a clearing where there was a pool of fresh clear water. It was fed by a small stream that came suddenly, like a snake, out of the long grass. The water looked cool and inviting. Laying down the lathi and taking off my clothes, I ran down the bank until I was waist deep in the middle of the pool. I splashed about for some time before emerging, then I lay on the soft grass and allowed the sun to dry my body. I closed my eyes and gave myself up to beautiful thoughts. I had forgotten all about leopards. I must have slept for about half an hour because when I awoke, I found that there Ram had come back and was vigorously threshing about in the narrow confines of the pool. I sat up and asked him the time. 12 o'clock, he shouted, coming out of water, his dripping body all gold and silver in sunlight. They will be waiting for dinner. Let them wait, I said. It was a relief to talk to Dayaram after the uneasy conversations in the lounge and dining room. Dayal Sahib will be angry with me. I will tell him we found the trail of the leopard, and that we went so far into the jungle that we lost our way. As Miss Deeds is so critical of the food, let her cook the meal. Oh, she only talks like that, said Dayaram. Inside she is very soft. She is too soft. In some ways, she should be married. Well, she would like to be. Only there is no one to marry her. When she came here, she was engaged to be married to an English army captain. I think she loved him, but she is the sort of person who cannot help loving many men all at once, and the captain could not understand that. It is just the way she is made, I suppose. She is always ready to fall in love. You seem to know, I said. Oh, yes. We dressed and walked back to the hotel. In a few hours, I thought, the Tonga will come for me and I will be back at the station. The mysterious charm of Shamli will be no more, but whenever I pass this way I will wonder about these people, about Miss Deeds and Lynn and Mrs. Dayal. Mrs. Dayal. She was the one person I had yet to meet. It was with some excitement and curiosity that I looked forward to meeting her. She was about the only mystery left to Shamli now, and perhaps she would be no mystery when I met her. And yet, I felt that perhaps she would justify the impulse that made me get down from the train. I could have asked Daya Ram about Mrs. Dayal, and so satisfied my curiosity, but I wanted to discover her for myself. Half the day was left to me, and I didn't want my game to finish too early. I walked towards the veranda, and the sound of the piano came through the open door. I wish Mr. Lin would play something cheerful, said Miss Deeds. He's obsessed with the funeral march. Do you dance? Oh no, I said. She looked disappointed. But when Lynn left the piano, she went into the lounge and sat down on the stool. I stood at the door watching her, wondering what she would do. Lynn left the room, somewhat resentfully. She began to play an old song, which I remembered having heard in a film or on a gramophone record. She sang while she played, in a slightly harsh but pleasant voice. Rolling round the world, looking for the sunshine. I know I'm going to find someday. Then she played Am I Blue? And Darling, Je vous aime beaucoup. She sat there, singing in a deep husky voice, her eyes a little misty, her hard face suddenly kind and sloppy. When the dinner gong rang, she broke off playing and shook off her sentimental mood and laughed derisively at herself. I don't remember that lunch. I hadn't slept much since the previous night and I was beginning to feel the strain of my journey. The swim had refreshed me, but it had also made me drowsy. I ate quite well, though, of rice and kofta curry, and then, feeling sleepy, made for the garden to find a shady tree. There were some books on the shelf in the lounge, and I ran my eye over them in search of one that might condition sleep. But they were too dull to do even that. So I went into the garden, and there was Kiran on the swing, and I went to her tree and sat down on the grass. Did you find the leopard? She asked. No, I said, with a yawn. Tell me a story. You tell me one, I said. All right. Once there was a lazy man with long legs, who was always yawning and wanting to fall asleep. I watched the swaying motions of the swing and the movements of the girl's bare legs, and a tiny insect kept buzzing about in front of my nose. And fall asleep, and the reason for this was that he liked to dream. I blew the insect away, and the swing became hazy and distant, and Kiran was a blurred figure in the trees. Liked to dream. And what do you think he dreamt about? Dreamt about? When I awoke, there was that cool rain-scented breeze blowing across the garden. I remember lying on the grass with my eyes closed, listening to the swishing of the swing. Either I had not slept long, or Kiran had been a long time on the swing. It was moving slowly now, in a more leisurely fashion, without much sound. I opened my eyes and saw that my arm was stained with the juice of the grass beneath me. Looking up, I expected to see Kiran's legs waving above me. But instead I saw dark slim feet, and above them the folds of a sari. I straightened up against the trunk of the tree to look closer at Kiran, but Kiran wasn't there. It was someone else in the swing, a young woman in a pink sari and with a red rose in her hair. She had stopped the swing with her foot on the ground, and she was smiling at me. It wasn't a smile you could see, it was a tender fleeting movement that came suddenly and was gone at the same time, and its going was sad. I thought of the others' smiles, just as I had thought of their skins, the Tonga driver's friendly, deceptive grin. Their Ram's white sincere smile, Miss Deed's cynical, derisive smile. And looking at Sushila, I knew a smile could never change. She had always smiled that way. You haven't changed, she said. I was standing up now, though still leaning against the tree for support. Though I had never thought much about the sound of her voice, it seemed as familiar as the sounds of yesterday. You haven't changed either, I said. But where did you come from? I wasn't sure yet if I was awake or dreaming. She laughed, as she had always laughed at me. I came from behind the tree. The little girl has gone. Yes, I'm dreaming, I said helplessly. But what brings you here? I don't know. At least I didn't know when I came. But it must have been you. The train stopped at Shamli, and I don't know why, but I decided I would spend the day here, behind the station walls. You must be married now, Sushila. Yes, I am married to Mr. Dayal, the manager of the hotel. And what has been happening to you? I am still a writer, still poor, and still living in Mussoorie. When were you last in Delhi? She asked. I don't mean Delhi, I mean at home. I have not been to your home since you were there. Oh, my friend, she said, getting up suddenly and coming to me, I want to talk to you. I want to talk about our home and Sunil and our friends and all those things that are so far away now. I have been here 2 years and I am already feeling old. I keep remembering our home, how young I was, how happy, and I am all alone with memories. But now you are here. It was a bit of magic. I came through the trees after Kiran had gone, and there you were, fast asleep under the tree. I didn't wake you then, because I wanted to see you wake up, as I used to watch you wake up. She was near me and I could look at her more closely. Her cheeks did not have the same freshness, they were a little pale, and she was thin now, but her eyes were the same, smiling the same way. Her voice was the same. Her fingers, when she took my hand, were the same warm, delicate fingers. Talk to me, she said. Tell me about yourself. You tell me, I said. I am here, she said. That is all there is about myself. Then let us sit down, and I will talk. Not here. She took my hand and led me through the trees. Come with me. I heard the jingle of a tonga bill and a faint shout. I stopped and laughed. My tonga, I said, it has come to take me back to the station. But you are not going, said Sushila, immediately downcast. I will tell him to come in the morning, I said. I will spend the night in your Shamli. I walked to the front of the hotel where the Tonga was waiting. I was glad no one else was in sight. The youth was smiling at me in his most appealing manner. I'm not going today, I said. Will you come tomorrow morning? I can come whenever you like, friend. But you will have to pay for every trip. Because it is a long way from the station even if my Tonga is empty. All right, how much? Usual fare, friend, 1 rupee. I didn't try to argue but resignedly gave him the rupee. He cracked his whip and pulled on the reins, and the carriage moved off. If you don't leave tomorrow, the youth called out after me, you'll never leave. Shamli. I walked back to trees, but I couldn't find Sushila. Sushila, where are you? I called, but I might have been speaking to the trees, for I had no reply. There was a small path going through the orchard, and on the path I saw a rose petal. I walked a little further and saw another petal. They were from Sushila's red rose. I walked on down the path until I had skirted the orchard, and then the path went along the fringe of the jungle, past a clump of bamboos, and here the grass was a lush green as though it had been constantly watered. I was still finding rose petals. I heard the chatter of 7 sisters and the call of Hupu. The path bent to meet a stream. There was a willow coming down to the water's edge, and Sushila was waiting there. Why didn't you wait? I said. I wanted to see if you were as good at following me as you used to be. Well, I am, I said, sitting down beside her on the grassy bank of the stream. Even if I'm out of practice. Yes, I remember the time you climbed onto an apple tree to pick some fruit for me. You got up all right, but then you couldn't come down again. I had to climb up myself and help you. I don't remember that, I said. Of course you do. It must have been your other friend, Pramod. I never climbed trees with Pramod. Well, I don't remember. I looked at the little stream that ran past us. The water was no more than ankle deep. Cold and clear and sparkling, like the mountain stream near my home. I took off my shoes, rolled up my trousers, and put my feet in water. Sushila's feet joined mine. At first I had wanted to ask her about her marriage, whether she was happy or not. What she thought of her husband, but now I couldn't ask her these things, they seemed far away and of little importance. I could think of nothing she had in common with Emma. Dayal, I felt that her charm and attractiveness and warmth could not have been appreciated, or even noticed, by that curiously distracted man. He was much older than her, of course, probably older than me. He was obviously not her choice but her parents', and so far they were childless. Had there been children, I don't think Sushila would have minded Mr. Dayal as her husband. Children would have made up for the absence of passion, or was there passion in Satish Dayal? I remembered having heard that Sushila had been married to a man she didn't like. I remembered having shrugged off the news, because it meant she would never come my way again, and I have never yearned after something that has been irredeemably lost. But she had come my way again. And was she still lost? That was what I wanted to know. What do you do with yourself all day? I asked. Oh, I visit the school and help with the classes. It is the only interest I have in this. place. The hotel is terrible. I try to keep away from it as much as I can. And what about the guests? Oh, don't let us talk about them. Let us talk about ourselves. Do you have to go tomorrow? Yes, I suppose so. Will you always be in this place? I suppose so. That made me silent. I took her hand, and my feet churned up the mud at the bottom of the stream. As the mud subsided, I saw Sushila's face reflected in the water, and looking up at her again, into her dark eyes, the old yearning returned, and I wanted to care for her and protect her. I wanted to take her away from that place, from sorrowful Shamli. I wanted her to live again. Of course, I had forgotten all about my poor finances, Sushila's family, and the shoes I wore, which were my last pair. The uplift I was experiencing in this meeting with Sushila, who had always, throughout her childhood and youth, bewitched me as no other had ever bewitched me, made me reckless and impulsive. I lifted her hand to my lips and kissed her in the soft of the palm. Can I kiss you? I said. You have just done so. Can I kiss you? I repeated. It is not necessary. I leaned over and kissed her slender neck. I knew she would like this, because that was where I had kissed her often before. I kissed her in the soft of the throat, where it tickled. It is not necessary, she said, but she ran her fingers through my hair and let them rest there. I kissed her behind the ear then, and kept my mouth to her ear and whispered, Can I kiss you? She turned her face to me so that we were deep in each other's eyes, and I kissed her again, and we put our arms around each other and lay together on the grass, with the water running over our feet, and we said nothing at all, simply lay there for what seemed like several years, or until the first drop of rain. It was a big wet drop, and it splashed on Sushila's cheek, just next to mine, and ran down to her lips, so that I had to kiss her again. The next big drop splattered on the tip of my nose, and Sushila laughed and sat up. Little ringlets were forming on the stream, where the raindrops hit the water, and above us there was a pattering on the banana leaves. We must go, said Sushila. We started homewards, but had not gone far before it was raining steadily, and Sushila's hair came loose and streamed down her body. The rain fell harder, and we had to hop over pools and avoid the soft mud. Sushila's sari was plastered to her body, accentuating her ripe, thrusting breasts, and I was excited to passion, and pulled her beneath a big tree and crushed her in my arms and kissed her rain-kissed mouth. And then I thought she was crying, but I wasn't sure, because it might have been the raindrops on her cheeks. Come away with me, I said. Leave this place. Come away with me tomorrow morning. We will go somewhere where nobody will know us or come between us. She smiled at me and said, You are still a dreamer, aren't you? Why can't you come? I am married, it is as simple as that. If it is that simple, you can come. I have to think of my parents, too. It would break my father's heart if I were to do what you are proposing. And you are proposing it without a thought for the consequences. You are too practical. I said. If women were not practical, most marriages would be failures. So your marriage is a success? Of course it is, as a marriage. I am not happy and I do not love him, but neither am I so unhappy that I should hate him. Sometimes, for our own sakes, we have to think of the happiness of others. What happiness would we have living in hiding from everyone we once knew and cared for? Don't be a fool. I am always here and you can come to see me and nobody will be made unhappy by it. But take me away and we will only have regrets. You don't love me, I said foolishly. That sad word love, she said, and became pensive and silent. I could say no more. I was angry again, and rebellious, and there was no one and nothing to rebel against. I could not understand someone who was afraid to break away from an unhappy existence lest that existence should become unhappier. I had always considered it an admirable thing to break away from security and respectability. Of course it is easier for a man to do this. A man can look after himself, he can do without neighbors and the approval of the local society. A woman, I reasoned, would do anything for love provided it was not at the price of security, for a woman loves security as much as a man loves independence. I must go back now, said Susila. You follow a little later. All you wanted to do was talk, I complained. She laughed at that, and pulled me playfully by the hair. Then she ran out from under the tree, springing across the grass, and the wet mud flew up and flecked her legs. I watched her through the thin curtain of rain, until she reached the veranda. She turned to wave to me, and then skipped into the hotel. She was still young, but I was no younger. The rain had lessened, but I didn't know what to do with myself. The hotel was uninviting, and it was too late to leave Shamli. If the grass hadn't been wet I would have preferred to sleep under a tree rather than return to the hotel to sit at that alarming dining table. I came out from under the trees and crossed the garden. But instead of making for the veranda I went round to the back of the hotel. Smoke issuing from the barred window of a back room told me I had probably found the kitchen. Daya Ram was inside, squatting in front of a stove, stirring a pot of stew. The stew smelled appetizing. Daya Ram looked up and smiled at me. I thought you must have gone, he said. I will go in the morning, I said, pulling myself upon an empty table. Then I had one of my sudden ideas and said, why don't you come with me? I can find you a good job in Mussoorie. How much do you get paid here? 50 rupees a month. But I haven't been paid for 3 months. Could you get your pay before tomorrow morning? No, I won't get anything until one of the guests pays a bill. Miss Deeds owes about 50 rupees on whiskey alone. She will pay up, she says, when the school pays her salary. And the school can't pay her until they collect the children's fees. That is how bankrupt everyone is in Shamli. I see, I said, though I didn't see. But Mr. Dayal can't hold back your pay just because his guests haven't paid their bills. He can, if he hasn't got any money. I see, I said, anyway, I will give you my address. You can come when you are free. I will take it from the register, he said. I edged over to the stove and, leaning over, sniffed at the stew. I will eat mine now, I said, and without giving Daya Ram a chance to object, I lifted a plate off the shelf, took hold of the stirring spoon and helped myself from the pot. There is rice too, said Daya Ram. I filled another plate with rice and then got busy with my fingers. After 10 minutes I had finished. I sat back comfortably in the hotel, in ruminative mood. With my stomach full, I could take a more tolerant view of life and people. I could understand Sushila's apprehensions, Lynn's delicate line, and Miss Deed's aggressiveness. Their Ram went out to sound the dinner gong, and I trailed back to my room. From the window of my room I saw Kiran running across the lawn, and I called to her, but she didn't hear me. She ran down the path and out of the gate, her pigtails beating against the wind. The clouds were breaking and coming together again, twisting and spiraling there. Way across a violet sky. The sun was going down behind the Sivaliks. The sky there was bloodshot. The tall slim trunks of the eucalyptus tree were tinged with an orange glow. The rain had stopped, and the wind was a soft, sullen puff, drifting sadly through the trees. There was a steady drip of water from the eaves of the roof onto the windowsill. Then the sun went down behind the old hills, and I remembered my own hills, far beyond these. The room was dark, but I did not turn on the light. I stood near the window, listening to the garden. There was a frog wobbling somewhere, and there was a sudden flap of wings overhead. Tomorrow morning I would go, and perhaps I would come back to Shamli one day, and perhaps not. I could always come here looking for Major Roberts. And, who knows, one day I might find him. What should he be like, this lost man? A romantic, a man with a dream, a man with brown skin and blue eyes, living in a hut on a snowy mountain top, chopping wood and catching fish and swimming in cold mountain streams, a rough, free man with a kind heart and a shaggy beard, a man who owed allegiance to no one, who gave a damn for money and politics and cities and civilizations, who was his own master, who lived at one with nature knowing no fear. But that was not Major Roberts, that was the man I wanted to be. He was not a Frenchman or an Englishman, he was me, a dream of myself. If only I could find Major Roberts. When their Ram knocked on the door and told me the others had finished dinner, I left my room and made for the lounge. It was quite lively in the lounge. Satish Dayal was at the bar, Lynn at the piano, and Miss Deeds in the center of the room, executing a tango on her own. It was obvious she had been drinking heavily. All on credit, complained Mr. Dayal to me. I don't know when I'll be paid, but I don't dare to refuse her anything for fear she starts breaking up the hotel. She could do that, too, I said. It comes down without much encouragement. Lynn began to play a waltz, I think it was waltz, and then I found Miss Deeds in front of me, saying, "Wouldn't you like to dance, old boy?" "Thank you," I said, somewhat alarmed. "I hardly know how to." "Oh, come on, be a sport," she said, pulling me away from the bar. I was glad Sushila wasn't present. She wouldn't have minded, but she'd have laughed as she always laughed when I made a fool of myself. We went round the floor in what I suppose was waltz time, though all I did was mark time to Miss Deeds' motions. We were not very steady, this because I was trying to keep her at arm's length, whilst she was determined to have me crushed to her bosom. At length Lynn finished the waltz. Giving him a grateful look, I pulled myself free. Miss Deeds went over to the piano, leant right across it, and said, "Play some lively, dear Emma." "Lynn, play some hot stuff." To my surprise, Mr. Lin, without so much as an expression of distaste or amusement, began to execute what I suppose was the frog or the jitterbug. I was glad she hadn't asked me to dance that one with her. It all appeared very incongruous to me, Miss Deeds letting herself go in crazy abandonment, Lin playing the piano with great seriousness, and Mr. Dayal watching from the bar with an anxious frown. I wondered what Sushila would have thought of them now. Eventually Miss Deeds collapsed on the couch, breathing heavily. "Give me a drink," she cried. With the noblest of intentions, I took her a glass of water. Miss Deeds took a sip and made a face. "What's this stuff?" she asked. "It is different." "Water," I said. "No," she said. "Now don't joke. Tell me what it is." "It's water, I assure you," I said. When she saw that I was serious, her face colored up, and I thought she would throw the water at me, but she was too tired to do this, and contented herself by throwing the glass over her shoulder. Mr. Dayal made a dive for the flying glass, but he wasn't in time to rescue it, and it hit the wall and fell to pieces on the floor. Mr. Dayal wrung his hands. "You'd better take her to her room," he said, as though I were personally responsible for her behavior just because I danced with her. "I can't carry her alone," I said, making an unsuccessful attempt at helping Miss Deeds up from the couch. Mr. Dayal called for Dayaram, and the big amiable youth came lumbering into the lounge. We took an arm each and helped Miss Deeds, feet dragging, across the room. We got her to her room and onto her bed. When we were about to withdraw, she said, "Don't go, my dear, stay with me a little while." Dayaram had discreetly slipped outside. With my hand on the doorknob, I said, "Which of us?" "Oh, are there two of you?" said Miss Deeds, without a trace of disappointment. "Yes, Dayaram helped me carry you here." "Oh, and who are you?" "I'm the writer. You danced with me, remember?" "Of course. You dance divinely, Mr. Writer. Do stay with me. Dayaram can stay too, if he likes." I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob. She hadn't opened her eyes all the time I'd been in the room. Her arms hung loose, and one bare leg hung over the side of the bed. She was fascinating somehow, and desirable, but I was afraid of her. I went out of the room and quietly closed the door. As I lay awake in bed, I heard the jackal's foe, the cry of fear, which it communicates to all the jungle when there is danger about, a leopard or a tiger. It was a weird howl, and between each note there was a kind of low gurgling. I switched off the light and peered through the closed window. I saw the jackal at the edge of the lawn. It sat almost vertically on its haunches, holding its head straight up to the sky, making the neighborhood vibrate with the airy violence of its cries. Then suddenly it started up and ran off into the trees. Before getting back into bed, I made sure the window was fast. The bullfrog was singing again, "Aingiong, Aingiong," in some foreign language. I wondered if Sushila was awake too, thinking about me. It must have been almost 11 o'clock. I thought of Miss Deeds, with her leg hanging over the edge of the bed. I tossed restlessly, and then sat up. I hadn't slept for 2 nights, but I was not sleepy. I got out of bed without turning on the light and, slowly opening my door, crept down the passageway. I stopped at the Door of Miss Deed's room. I stood there listening, but I heard only the ticking of the big clock that might have been in the room or somewhere in the passage. I put my hand on the doorknob, but the door was bolted. That settled the matter. I would definitely leave Shamli the next morning. Another day in the company of these people, and I would be behaving like them. Perhaps I was already doing so. I remembered the Tonga driver's words, "Don't stay too long in Shamli or you will never leave." When the rain came, it was not with a preliminary patter or shower, but all at once, sweeping across the forest like a massive wall, and I could hear it in the trees long before it reached the house. Then it came crashing down on the corrugated roofing, and the hailstones hit the window panes with a hard metallic sound, so that I thought the glass would break. The sound of thunder was like the booming of big guns, and the lightning kept playing over the garden. At every flash of lightning I sighted the swing under the tree, rocking and leaping in the air as though some invisible, agitated being was sitting on it. I wondered about Kiran. Was she sleeping through all this, blissfully unconcerned, or was she lying awake in bed, starting at every clash of thunder, as I was, or was she up and about, exulting in the storm? I half expected to see her come running through the trees, through the rain, to stand on the swing with her hair blowing wild in the wind, laughing at the thunder and the angry skies. Perhaps I did see her. Perhaps she was there. I wouldn't have been surprised if she were some forest nymph, living in the hole of a tree, coming out sometime to play in the garden. A crash, nearer and louder than any thunder so far, made me sit up in the bed with a start. Perhaps lightning had struck the house. I turned on the switch, but the light didn't come on. A tree must have fallen across the line. I heard voices in the passage, the voices of several people. I stepped outside to find out what had happened, and started at the appearance of a ghostly apparition right in front of me. It was Mr. Dayal standing on the threshold in an oversized pajama suit, a candle in his hand. "I came to wake you," he said. "This storm." He had the irritating habit of stating the obvious. "Yes, the storm," I said. "Why is everybody up?" "The back wall has collapsed and part of the roof has fallen in. We'd better spend the night in the lounge. It is the safest room. This is a very old building," he added apologetically. "All right," I said. "I am coming." The lounge was lit by two candles. One stood over the piano, the other on a small table near the couch. Miss Deeds was on the couch. Lynn was at the piano stool, looking as though he would start playing Stravinsky any moment, and Mr. Dayal was fussing about the room. Sushila was standing at a window, looking out at the stormy night. I went to the window and touched her. She didn't look round or say anything. The lightning flashed and her dark eyes were pools of smoldering fire. "What time will you be leaving?" she said. "The Tonga will come for me at 7. "If I come," she said. "If I come with you, I will be at the station before the train leaves." "How will you get there?" I asked, and hope and excitement rushed over me again. "I will get there," she said. "I will get there before you. But if I am not there, then do not wait, do not come back for me. Go on your way. It will mean I do not want to come. Or I will be there." "But are you sure?" Don't stand near me now. Don't speak to me unless you have to. She squeezed my fingers, then drew her hand away. I sauntered over to the next window, then back into the center of the room. A gust of wind blew through a cracked window pane and put out the candle near the couch. Damn the wind, said Miss Deeds. The window in my room had burst open during the night, and there were leaves and branches strewn about the floor. I sat down on the damp bed and smelt eucalyptus. The earth was red, as though the storm had bled it all night. After a little while I went into the veranda with my suitcase to wait for the tonga. It was then that I saw Kiran under the trees. Kiran's long black pigtails were tied up in a red ribbon, and she looked fresh and clean like the rain and the red earth. She stood, looking seriously at me. Did you like the storm? She asked. Some of the time, I said. I'm going soon. Can I do anything for you? Where are you going? I'm going to the end of the world. I'm looking for Major Roberts. Have you seen him anywhere? There is no Major Roberts, she said perceptively. Can I come with you to the end of the world? What about your parents? Oh, we won't take them. They might be annoyed if you go off on your own. I can stay on my own. I can go anywhere. Well, one day I will come back here, and I will take you everywhere, and no one will stop us. Now, is there anything else I can do for you? I want some flowers, but I can't reach them. She pointed to a hibiscus tree that grew against the wall. It meant climbing the wall to reach the flowers. Some of the red flowers had fallen during the night and were floating in a pool of water. All right, I said and pulled myself up on the wall. I smiled down into Kiran's serious upturned face. I will throw them to you and you can catch them. I bent a branch, but the wood was young and green, and I had to twist it several times before it snapped. I hope nobody minds, I said, as I dropped the flowering branch to Kiran. It's nobody's tree, she said. Sure? She nodded vigorously. Sure, don't worry. I was working for her and she felt immensely capable of protecting me. Talking and being with Kiran, I felt a nostalgic longing for the childhood, emotions that had been beautiful because they were never completely understood. Who is your best friend? I said. Dayaram, she replied. I told you so before. She was certainly faithful to her friends. And who is the second best? She put her finger in her mouth to consider the question. Her head dropped sideways in concentration. I will make you the second best, she said. I dropped the flowers over her head. That is so kind of you. I'm proud to be your second best. I heard the tonga bell, and from my perch on the wall saw the carriage coming down the driveway. That's for me, I said. I must go now. I jumped down the wall, and the sole of my shoe came off at last. I knew that would happen, I said. Who cares for shoes, said Kiran. Who cares, I said. I walked back to the veranda, and Kiran walked beside me, and stood in front of the hotel while I put my suitcase in the tonga. You nearly stayed one day too late, said the tonga driver. Half the hotel has come down, and tonight the other half will come down. I climbed into the back seat. Kiran stood on the path, gazing intently at me. I will see you again, I said. I will see you in Iceland or Japan, she said. I'm going everywhere. Maybe, I said, maybe you will. We smiled, knowing and understanding each other's importance. In her bright eyes I saw something old and wise. The Tonga driver cracked his whip, the wheels cracked. The carriage rattled down the path. We kept waving to each other. In Kiran's hand was a sprig of hibiscus. As she waved, the blossoms fell apart and danced a little in breeze. Shamli station looked the same as it had the day before. The same train stood at the same platform, and the same dogs prowled beside the fence. I waited on the platform until the bell clanged for the train to leave, but Sushila did not come. Somehow, I was not disappointed. I had never really expected her to come. Unattainable, Sushila would always be more bewitching and beautiful than if she were mine. Shamli would always be there. And I could always come back, looking for Major Roberts.